remember the exact way the sunlight used to fall across the kitchen table. It would stretch in through the old window I installed myself, warming the worn wood where my daughter used to sit, legs swinging, laughing about things that didn't matter. Back then, everything felt permanent, solid, safe. I believed in something simple. If you built a home with your hands and filled it with love, it would hold. I was wrong. It didn't collapse all at once. That would have been easier. No, it unraveled slowly, like a thread you don't notice until the whole fabric begins to loosen. Sell it or leave. That's what she said, no hesitation, no apology. Just those 4 words dropped into the room like they belonged there. For a moment, I honestly thought I'd misheard her. The same voice that once asked me to check under her bed for monsters now stood across from me, calm and cold, telling me I didn't belong in my own home. I laughed at first. Not because it was funny, but because it was impossible. You don't mean that, I said, still holding onto something fragile, something old. This is your home too. She didn't smile, didn't soften. That's exactly why I'm saying it. Just like that, something shifted. The room didn't change. The walls were still mine. The photographs still hung where I had placed them. But suddenly, I felt like a stranger standing inside someone else's life. I had spent decades building that house. Not just the structure, the memories. The late nights fixing broken pipes. The weekends repainting rooms she kept changing her mind about. The sacrifices I never spoke about, the opportunities I turned down, all so she could have stability. And now she was telling me to leave it behind. It didn't make sense. That was the first emotion, confusion, not anger, not even hurt. Just a hollow, disoriented disbelief. What are you talking about? I asked, quieter this time. She crossed her arms like she had rehearsed this. You've had your time here, she said. It's my turn now, I have plans. This place could be worth a lot if we sell it, or I can take over and make it what it should be. What it should be, the words stung more than the ultimatum itself, because to her, everything I had built wasn't enough, not modern enough, not valuable enough, not right. And somewhere between those words, I realized something even worse. She wasn't asking. She thought she had the authority. That's when the confusion started turning into something else, a slow, creeping unease. How exactly do you plan to take over? I asked. She shrugged, almost casually. I already spoke to someone. There are options, legal ones. Legal, that word landed differently, not because I believed her, but because she believed herself. And that was the beginning of the illusion. You see, power doesn't always come from truth. Sometimes it comes from confidence. From the way someone stands, speaks, acts like they already own the outcome. And in that moment, she did. I felt it. She wasn't the little girl at the kitchen table anymore. She was someone else entirely, someone who saw me not as a parent, but as an obstacle. And somehow I had become smaller. I don't remember what I said after that. I think I tried to reason with her. Tried to remind her of things, birthdays, sacrifices, moments that should have mattered. But every word I offered felt outdated, like I was speaking a language she no longer understood. She had already moved on, already decided, already rewritten the story in her head where she was justified and I was in the way. The next few days blurred together. The house felt different. Not physically, but emotionally. Every room carried tension now. Every silence stretched too long. We avoided each other at first. Then came the small changes. Drawers moved. Papers shifted. Conversations happening behind closed doors. Once I overheard her on the phone. Yes, I live here, she said. It's basically mine anyway. Basically mine, that phrase echoed in my head long after the call ended, because that was the second shift, the quiet displacement. No one had physically pushed me out yet. I still slept in my bed, still made my coffee in the morning, but ownership, that invisible line, had started to blur, and I could feel myself stepping back. Not because I wanted to, but because something inside me didn't know how to fight this. How do you argue with your own child when they've already decided you're the problem? How do you defend what's yours without feeling like you're betraying everything you taught them about love, generosity, sacrifice? That was the trap, not just her words, but my own instincts. I had spent years teaching her to be strong, independent, to stand up for what she believed in, and now she was doing exactly that. Just not in the way I ever imagined. One evening, she sat across from me again, no warmth, no hesitation. I need an answer, she said. Are you selling or not? There it was again, that same pressure, that same certainty, and I noticed something this time. She never once said our home was always about what she wanted, what she deserved, what she planned, not what was real, not what was true. And that's when the faintest crack appeared in her certainty. Because for the first time, I asked myself a different question. Not why is she doing this, but how does she think she can? There's a difference. One question keeps you trapped in emotion. The other starts pulling you toward clarity. I didn't say that out loud, not yet. Instead, I looked around the room, at the walls I painted, the floors I laid, the documents I signed years ago, carefully, deliberately, things she had never seen, never needed to think about. And suddenly, beneath the confusion, beneath the hurt, something small but steady began to form, doubt, not about myself, about her certainty. Because the more I thought about it, the more something didn't add up. She spoke with confidence, but not precision, with authority, but not understanding. She used words like legal and options, but never specifics. And that's when the illusion started to show itself: power without knowledge, control without foundation. It's a dangerous combination, but also a fragile one. I didn't confront her that night. I didn't argue. Instead, I did something she didn't expect. I stepped back from the conversations, from the tension, from the need to immediately defend myself. And in that space, something shifted. Because when you stop reacting, you start observing. And what I began to see was this: she wasn't in control. She just believed she was. The next morning, I sat alone at the same kitchen table. The sunlight came in exactly the same way. Nothing had changed. And yet, everything had. Because for the first time since she said those words, sell it or leave, I didn't feel powerless. I felt uncertain, yes. Hurt, absolutely. But powerless, no. There was something else now, something quiet, something patient. A realization I couldn't fully articulate yet, but strong enough to hold on to. Because the truth doesn't disappear just because someone else ignores it. And whatever foundation she thought she was standing on, I had a feeling it wasn't as solid as she believed. I looked around the house one more time, not as someone being pushed out, but as someone who might still have a say in how this ends. And for the first time since everything began, I didn't feel like I was losing my home. I felt like I had just started to understand the game. The first thing I did was open the drawer she never touched. It was old, stiff. The wood creaked the same way it always had, like it remembered every year I'd owned it. Inside were papers, neatly stacked, carefully kept, untouched by time or by her assumptions. That was the difference between us. She had confidence. I had proof. For days, I hadn't wanted to look. Because looking meant facing the truth, one way or another. Either she was right and I had already lost everything, or she was wrong and something far more complicated had begun. My hands weren't steady when I pulled the documents out, not from fear, from the weight of what they might confirm. I unfolded the first page slowly, my name clear, undisputed. Alone, no joint ownership, no transfer, no signature but mine. I stared at it longer than I needed to, as if it might change if I blinked. It didn't. And in that moment, something inside me shifted, not loudly, not dramatically, but firmly, like a door closing. Or maybe opening, because everything she had built her certainty on wasn't real. I leaned back in the chair, the same chair I had sat in for years, and let the silence settle around me. This house was basically hers. Wasn't shared, it wasn't negotiable, it was mine, legally, completely, undeniably. And suddenly all her words, every confident statement, every ultimatum felt different, not powerful, fragile. That's the thing about illusions. They look strong until you test them. I didn't rush to confront her. That would have been the old version of me, the one reacting, defending, trying to fix things emotionally. But this wasn't emotional anymore. This was reality. And reality doesn't need to shout. It just needs to stand. Still, I knew I couldn't rely on just my own interpretation. Not with something this important. So I did something I hadn't done in years. I asked for help. The lawyer's office smelled like paper and time. Shelves lined with files, stories of other people's conflicts stacked neatly, waiting for resolution. I sat across from him, documents in hand, and explained everything: the ultimatum, the tension, the claim that she had options. He listened quietly, occasionally nodding, occasionally glancing down at the papers. When I finished, there was a pause, then he said something simple. She doesn't have a case. Just like that, no hesitation, no uncertainty. I felt something loosen in my chest. You're the sole owner, he continued. Unless you've signed something transferring ownership, which you haven't, she has no legal authority to force a sale or remove you. Remove, the words echoed differently now, because they weren't possibilities anymore, they were impossibilities. She seems convinced, I said. He gave a small, knowing smile. People often are, he replied, especially when they confuse intention with entitlement. With entitlement. That was exactly it. She wanted control, so she assumed she had it. But wanting something doesn't make it yours. I left that office with more than just reassurance. I left with clarity. And clarity is dangerous to illusions. The next few days, I started noticing things differently, not as someone under pressure, but as someone observing a performance. She still moved through the house like it belonged to her. Still made calls. Still spoke about plans. I've already talked to someone about listing it, I heard her say one afternoon, listing it, without permission, without authority, and yet with complete confidence. Before that would have shaken me, now it almost felt surreal, because I could see the gap, the distance between what she believed and what was true, and that gap was where everything would break. I didn't interrupt her, not yet, because timing matters. Truth doesn't just need to be spoken, it needs to be revealed at the right moment. One evening, she approached me again, same posture, same certainty. She asked, "Have you decided?" I looked at her for a long moment. Really looked, not as my daughter, not as the child I raised, but as the person standing in front of me now, confident, determined, and completely wrong. I said calmly, "I have." She straightened slightly, expecting resistance, maybe even surrender. "I'm not selling," I continued. Her expression hardened immediately. "Then you'll need to leave," she said, almost automatically. There it was again. The illusion. I let the silence stretch just long enough to shift the weight of the moment. Then I placed the documents on the table between us. "You should read these." She frowned, clearly annoyed. "I already know." "No," I said, more firmly than before. "You think you know." That was the first time my voice had changed, not louder but steadier, and she noticed. Reluctantly, she picked up the papers. I watched her eyes move across the page, watched the confidence begin to falter, watched the first crack form. "This doesn't," she started, but stopped. "It does," I said quietly. She flipped to another page. Then another, each one telling the same story: ownership, authority, reality. This can't be right," she said, but there was uncertainty now. "It is." Her hands tightened around the papers. "You must have done something," she said, searching for something, anything that would restore her control. "I did," I replied. "Years ago, I bought a house. I paid for it. I kept it." The simplicity of it seemed to frustrate her more than anything, because there was no loophole, no trick, just truth. "You told me," she started again. "I told you this was your home," I said. "Not that it was yours to take." That distinction hung in the air between us: home versus ownership, love versus entitlement. She looked at me differently then, not as someone beneath her, but as someone she had misunderstood, or maybe underestimated. "This changes things," she said finally, her voice quieter. I agreed. "It does." Change isn't always acceptance, and she wasn't ready to accept it, not yet. The next few days were tense in a different way. Less confident, more reactive, she made more calls, spoke to different people, tried to find something, some angle that would restore the version of reality she had built. But every path led to the same place: nothing, because truth has a way of closing doors that illusions keep open. Eventually, she stopped making calls, stopped talking about selling, stopped using words like "my house." Something else replaced it: distance, cold, quiet distance. We lived in the same space, but not the same world. And I realized something important during that time. Winning doesn't always feel like victory. Sometimes it feels like loss. Because I hadn't just proven ownership. I had broken something, not intentionally, but inevitably. The relationship we had, the trust, the warmth, it didn't survive the truth intact. And maybe it couldn't, because what she had tried to do wasn't just a mistake. It was a choice. A choice driven by something deeper than misunderstanding, greed, control, or maybe just a belief that I would never push back. But I did, not with anger, not with force, but with truth. And truth doesn't negotiate. One morning, I found her standing in the same light, but everything else was different. "I didn't realize," she said quietly. I didn't answer right away, because those words, they weren't an apology, they were an acknowledgement, and sometimes that's all you get. "I know," I said finally. She nodded, but didn't meet my eyes. I thought it would be easier," she admitted. "Easier for who?" For her, clearly. For me, it had been anything but. "I raised you to be strong," I said slowly. "Not to take what isn't yours." That was the closest I came to saying everything I felt. She didn't argue, didn't defend herself, just stood there, caught between who she had been and who she had chosen to become. Eventually, she left the room. And just like that, the house felt quiet again, not tense, not uncertain, just quiet. But it wasn't the same quiet as before. This one felt earned. Because for the first time since everything began, there was no illusion left, only truth. Days turned into weeks. Tension faded, but the distance remained. She stayed for a while, then one day she packed a bag. "I think I need space," she said. I nodded, because I understood. Not everything can be repaired immediately. Some things need distance to even begin to heal or to end. After she left, I walked through the house slowly, room by room, not to check anything, not to reclaim anything, but to feel it, to understand what it meant now. Because this place, it wasn't just walls and floors, it was history. It was sacrifice. It was identity. And for a moment, I had almost let someone else redefine it, but not anymore. I stood in the kitchen where it had all begun, where she had said those words. "Sell it or leave." I realized something. She had tried to take the house. But what she almost took was something deeper, my sense of self, my confidence, my right to stand in what I had built and say, this is mine, not out of possession, but out of truth. And now that truth was clearer than ever. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt steady, grounded, certain. Because strength isn't about overpowering someone else. It's about not surrendering yourself even when it would be easier, even when it hurts. I sat down at the table again, sunlight stretching across the wood just like it always had. Some things hadn't changed. And maybe they didn't need to, because the house was still here. And so was I, not as someone being pushed out, not as someone defending what was theirs, but as someone who understood, finally, what it meant to stand firm. And if there was one thing this had taught me, it's that betrayal can shake you, it can confuse you, it can make you question everything, but it cannot rewrite the truth. And it cannot take what you refuse to give away, not your home, not your dignity, not yourself. Because in the end, ownership isn't just about what's written on paper. It's about knowing your worth and refusing to let anyone convince you otherwise.